Get ready to step into a world where the unknown lurks in the shadows and the impossible becomes reality. Here, you will hear stories that defy logic, encounters with the unexplained, and mysteries that echo through time. Welcome, but be careful. Some stories are more than just tales. They are still alive. Good evening, everyone. Personally, I believe that the material and the spiritual coexist with us much closer than we think. Since I was little, I have had the gift of seeing what most cannot. That never stopped me from visiting cemeteries. On the contrary, I have always considered them places of peace, full of stories silenced by time. Walking among the tombs, I would observe the photos and imagine who those people had been. To me, that place was a refuge. Years passed, and during a difficult time in my life, I made a promise. If my request was granted, every week I would light candles and leave bread and water for the souls. When my request came true, I kept my word. However, some very strange things began to happen. I began to feel presences around me. Some were subtle. I would only feel a chill or hear a distant whisper. Others, however, were more intense. I felt gentle touches on my shoulder, slight pushes, and saw figures that disappeared as soon as I blinked. It was then that I realized I was not alone. One night, while lighting candles at the cemetery's cross, I saw a lady sitting on a tomb. She was elegant, wore glasses, and held a purse in her lap. I thought she was a visitor like me. But when I got distracted for a moment and looked back, she had vanished. I looked around, but there was nowhere for her to have gone. It was at that moment I understood that it wasn't just my prayers attracting these presences, but also the light of the candles. Over time, I began to notice that these presences were everywhere. In the streets, in buildings, in corridors. Some simply passed by, while others seemed trapped, reliving moments of their lives. I started to wonder how many times, upon hearing a strange noise or feeling a sudden chill, it wasn't merely the wind, but someone trying to be noticed. My most frightening experience occurred in my own room. Every night, exactly at 11:30, an intense cold would take over the space. I felt a presence beside my bed, watching me. For 2 months, I lived with that sensation. Every night was a battle between fear and curiosity. Sometimes I heard a soft sound as if someone were sighing near me. Other times, the covers were gently tugged, yet I lacked the courage to open my eyes. One night, however, I mustered the courage to look. Before me stood a humanoid form, a pale gray figure without defined features. Its body did not seem completely solid, but its presence was undeniable. I felt absolute terror. My heart raced, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. I blinked, and it was still there. The next day, I sought out a faith healer. She confirmed what I feared. A spirit had attached itself to me. I underwent 3 sessions of healing, and then finally, it disappeared. After that experience, I decided to delve into spiritism. I learned to deal with the gift I had always carried, yet deliberately ignored. I still see and feel presences today, but I make it a point never to enter cemeteries again. Today, I can't even attend wakes or funerals. When I try, I feel dizzy, see shadows, and am overcome by an unbearable anguish. One of the strangest experiences I ever had was with a man named Vicent. He was a childhood acquaintance of mine, a man of Japanese origin. The two of them drank together every day. One day, while sitting in my hair salon, I saw Vicent walking up the hill. By his side, as always, was his Japanese friend. But there was something odd. They walked in an identical manner. The movement of their legs and arms was perfectly synchronized. Even the way they tilted their heads seemed mirrored. That unsettled me in a way I could not explain. Sometime later, I mentioned to an acquaintance that scene I had witnessed. It was then that I learned that Vicent's Japanese friend had died 2 months earlier. The shock was immediate. How could that be possible? Was it merely a coincidence, a figment of my imagination? But I knew what I had seen. Vicent's friend was there, walking by his side just as he had always done. While studying the subject, I realized that we all have free will, and if a person dies with a vice they could never break, they continue seeking the same sensations through those who are still alive. They keep pursuing the pleasure of that vice, siphoning the energy from those still mired in their addictions and remaining in the physical world, in our case, us, who also possess that same free will. What I recounted happened in Southampton, since I am from there, but for 10 years I have lived in Liverpool, and I have seen many things here as well. Sorry for the lengthy account. Thank you, Luke and the channel friends. Good night, everyone. Good evening, Luke and channel listeners. My name is Angela Dillon, and today I come to share with you another account. As I mentioned in a previous account, at the school where I worked, the supernatural exists and coexists with us, and on several occasions it made itself known in a very direct way. Not long ago, perhaps 2 to 4 months, I was in the vast corridor on the upper floor when we heard someone call my name 3 times. It was just me and a teacher who worked with us at the school. There was another teacher in the playroom with her students, and the door was closed. In the corridor, there was no one else but the 2 of us, and we clearly heard my name being called. We asked the teacher if she had called me, and her answer was negative. On another occasion, a colleague and I were again in the same corridor in the afternoon. The teacher and her students had just left the playroom but had forgotten to turn off the light and left the door open. It was then that we heard the sound of a chair being dragged inside the room. We went over to check, and my friends saw the silhouette of a child running to the back of the room. We thought perhaps a child had been left behind. However, when we entered, there was absolutely no one. It was surreal. When the 2024 school vacation arrived, the cleaning staff were washing the corridor and chatting about various subjects. Suddenly, the door of the last room, known for being haunted, slammed with a loud bang and then opened by itself. At the same moment, a sinister child's laugh echoed through the corridor. No one knows how that happened, since there were no children in the school. After all, it was vacation. They all exchanged glances and ran away, tripping over one another and nearly falling on the wet floor. Everyone trembled. They did not go back up there for more than an hour. But there was no escape. They had to return to finish the job and dry the corridor. When they returned, one of them gathered her courage and went to the room where the laugh had echoed. The door was closed. She tried to open it, but she couldn't. It seemed as if a force was holding the door from the inside, keeping it from moving. They finished the job in a hurry, looking around nervously. When they told me what had happened, I laughed a lot and said, "You didn't believe me when I talked about the supernatural in this school. No one ever believed the things I shared. It would be comical if it weren't tragic." Once, a colleague and I were in the corridor, sitting at a table and taking some notes. Unexpectedly, the door of the playroom opened slowly, making that characteristic creaking sound of wood. Note, there was no one in the room, which was completely dark. We got goosebumps. Shortly after, that same colleague saw a small, dark silhouette behind me, in the chair where I was sitting. Another staff member saw a completely white figure in a room from which a laugh had also been heard. Before that, she also witnessed a child passing in front of the teacher's room on a day when there were no classes and the school was completely empty. In another episode, the cleaning girls were sweeping the last park where there is a mini soccer field locked with a padlock. Suddenly, they heard a noise. When they looked at the gate, they saw the padlock spinning by itself from one side to the other. The fright was immense. My friends, the sightings of figures, shadows, and sinister noises throughout that school are countless. Even so, I have always been fascinated by the supernatural. Unfortunately, after a while, the school was deactivated and our disconnection was decreed. Our beloved school, located in the south of the city, was closed forever. Friends, that is the end of my story. I will never forget that school. And to be honest, I even miss the ghosts. Thank you very much for everyone's attention, and good night. Greetings, Luke. Before I begin my account, I would like to ask that my name not be mentioned. A few days ago, I was listening to another collection from this wonderful channel for which I have immense respect. One particular account caught my attention, that of a former nurse from a psychiatric hospital in Brazil. She mentioned that many people may not suffer from mental disorders, but end up being influenced by something evil. That part of the account struck me the most. Friends, what I'm about to share, I have never revealed to many people. In fact, only one cousin of mine, who is now deceased, and my sister have known this story. It all began when I was 12 years old. I remember being at school, part of a small group, as our class was working on a project. The teacher handed out magazines so we could cut out words and images. Suddenly, I came across a news report featured on the cover of one of them. The text spoke about a massacre that had occurred at a kindergarten in the United Kingdom. I was shocked and deeply affected by the age of the victims. I went home with that story pounding in my head. Throughout the night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The images of the children's faces would not leave my mind, and I even dreamed about them. Luke, I am sharing this because I believe that this news report was the trigger for everything I later experienced. The next day, an almost uncontrollable desire to harm my family arose in my heart. Suddenly, I found myself fighting a battle without weapons, without visible enemies, and without any help. I was very afraid to speak about it with anyone. I feared that, because of my young age, no one would take me seriously. I worried that my mother or my grandmother might think I was going insane. I began to feel an oppressive presence, something dark that whispered to me to hurt my parents and siblings. I suffered in silence, cried alone, and pleaded with God for help. I started sleeping with the Bible under my pillow, sometimes even under my head. I began to hide everything that could be used to hurt someone. Sharp objects, ropes, large construction stones. I kept it all in a small room at the back of my grandmother's house. But even so, I did not feel safe. Frequently, I woke up in the middle of the night with a tightness in my chest. I felt the presence of something evil that increasingly incited me to commit that abomination against the people I loved the most. The fear of going insane consumed me. I did everything to avoid any kind of trigger. I avoided TV shows that might awaken those thoughts, but I couldn't take it anymore. My friends, I was only a girl. Once, when I went to a church, I asked the pastor what kind of reading I could do to protect myself from these attacks of evil. He advised me to read Psalms 91 and 23 before sleeping, a time when these influences seemed strongest. From that day on, I made it a daily habit. From the ages of 12 to 17, I faced that battle. I remained firm, certain that I would be stronger than all of it. My heart was overwhelmed with deep anguish, and my soul was consumed by agony. I remember one day thinking, if it comes to choosing who must die in this situation, then it will be me. Yes, friends, in the midst of all that torment, I began to consider taking my own life. I felt that I was fighting against something greater and much stronger than myself. Luke, as I type this account, my heart fills with emotion. Although today I do not have as close a relationship with God, I feel that He has never given up on me. My eyes are welling up as I write. Currently, I do not follow any religion, but I am certain that God was with me and continues to be. Luke, this is my story. Something I never had the courage to reveal to anyone except 2 people throughout my life. I am immensely grateful if you can read this account. Perhaps there are many people going through what I went through, and my advice to them is do not give up. Finally, I want to mention a Bible verse I once read and have never forgotten. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Here I say goodbye. Luke and friends, I wish you all an excellent and blessed night. Sophie, good evening, my friends. My name is Courtney. I am 28 years old, and when this happened, I was doing my medical residency at a large hospital here in the region where I live. I was coming back from a party in another city. It was a friend's birthday, and I was getting a ride with a group of acquaintances. The agreement was that the driver wouldn't drink, but he miserably failed that promise. As soon as I realized he wasn't in any condition to drive, I called my father to pick me up. He was irritated, but agreed to come. I told him where I was, and he asked me to wait on the sidewalk. It was already past 2 in the morning. The place was deserted. I looked around anxiously when suddenly a woman appeared running toward me. She was crying, desperate, and grabbed my arms. She pleaded with me to go with her because her little son needed help. She begged, very nervous, crying and out of breath. I was frightened. I didn't know anyone in that city, and that woman was a complete stranger to me. But her desperation was real. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying so much. I hesitated for a moment, but something inside me told me to follow her. I even wondered if she knew me or somehow knew that I was a doctor. We ran down a dark street until we reached a small, simple house. The woman tried to open the door, but it was locked. From inside, I could hear the shrill cry of a baby. Without thinking twice, I pushed the door hard. After several attempts, it finally gave way. The house was modest but well kept. Everything was tidy, and a gentle scent of lavender filled the air. The baby was in the crib, red from crying so much. In the corner of the room, there was a bed, and lying on it was a person turned on their side. The first thing I thought was, why didn't this person get up to calm the baby? Annoyed, I went out to speak with the woman, but she was no longer there. The baby's cry made me go back inside. I picked him up and tried to wake the person lying on the bed. It was then that a feeling of terror overtook my body. The woman who had asked me for help was there. She was cold. Her skin seemed rigid. I checked her pulse and her pupils, but soon realized that her body was lifeless. My friends, I let out a scream and ran away with the baby in my arms. My heart was racing and my hands were trembling. I couldn't understand what was happening. How could that woman have called me if she was dead in there? Halfway along, I encountered a neighbor, an elderly lady who was coming in the direction of the house. She must have heard the noise when I had forced the door open. "Oh my God, girl! What happened?" she asked, alarmed. I tried to explain, but my voice came out trembling and confused. I recounted the woman who had asked me for help and how I found her lifeless in the room. The neighbor quickly called emergency services. When the team arrived, they confirmed what I already feared. The woman had been dead for at least 8 hours. The cause? Sudden death. I was paralyzed. How could someone who was already dead have asked me for help? The neighbor looked at me with teary eyes and held my hand. "You saw her, didn't you?" she whispered. I knew she wouldn't leave without trying to save the baby. That little boy was her life. She told me that the woman's name was Sophie and that she was a devoted mother. Her son was everything to her. The neighbor, who was a medium, cried upon hearing my account. She said that Sophie's spirit, in her infinite love, did the impossible to ensure that someone helped her son. I didn't know what to say. My heart was heavy. Amid it all, I felt a wave of respect and gratitude for that woman. She had chosen me to help her. Somehow, she trusted me to save her baby. That night, something changed within me. My beliefs, my values, everything transformed. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that there is something beyond this world in which we live. Since then, I have never ignored the signs of the inexplicable. And every time I think of Sophie, I say a prayer. A mother like her deserves to rest in peace, knowing that her love has transcended even the barriers of the physical world. Thank you very much for watching our video until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Have a haunted night, everyone, and see you next time.